Watch this. Buckle up for round.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
We welcome you into another episode of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. Sean Meyers, Jack Ridenour, each and every week talking high school basketball, the biggest stories across Westmoreland County. We've got a lot to get to, including a jam-packed edition of Plays of the Week, our Team of the Week, the Greater Latrobe Wildcats boys basketball team, a trivia question, and a look ahead to another very busy week in the WPIAL. But Jack, let's talk about some of the biggest stories with our starting five, the biggest takeaways from this past week. In a Westmoreland County showdown on the hardwood for boys action, you had the call of it. Norwin knocks off Hempfield area. Significant for the Knights. They get their first section victory, and all of a sudden they're right back in the thick of the playoff race. For Hempfield area, they remain winless in section play. Two teams that are trying to find their footing after graduating the vast majority of their starters from a year ago, but at this point it feels like the Knights may be a little bit further ahead.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this was a game that coming into it, it was teams that I think were, don't want to say desperate, but, you know, one or two more losses, and then you're starting to get into that desperation mode a little bit because coming into it, they were 0-4 each in the section. So you think, all right, you know, for Hempfield, for example, they're 0-5, you know, go to 0-5, then you get to 0-6 or 0-7. Then that starts to snowball a little bit out of control. But I was impressed with how, you know, these two teams kind of battled it out all the way through to the very end. They were very, very even teams. And Norwin, I was impressed with just the youth on this team. I mean, it's a team that graduated a good bit last year. Obviously, Adam Belinsky, one of the key players from last year for them. But you have a really strong sophomore class. I was really impressed with a lot of the sophomores on the team. And then you have some of the upperclassmen, too, that have done a nice job. I mean, give a lot of credit to Noah Wilson and his job that he's doing. I mean, the lone senior on the team that's had any varsity experience from last year, and he's doing a nice job being kind of that leader. So I was impressed with how Norwin really just fought their way out with this one. And then over for Hempfield, obviously a tough loss, but I think the biggest takeaway and the most impressive thing is the improvement of Max Williams. I mean, he has just turned into a totally different basketball player from last year to this year. His footwork has improved greatly, his touch around the rim. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he scored the first basket for Hempfield. It was a nice little 8-foot turnaround in the lane, and I was really impressed by that. Just a really, really great job by him to get better from last year to this year, and obviously for Hempfield, a tough loss, but you got to learn from those losses.
Yeah, I saw Williams this season as well. He certainly looks the part, and I know Bill Swan, his longtime head coach, said he's going to be a really good player when he gets, you know, to the college level. They want to make sure that he becomes a good or great player at the high school level for them as well. One thing that I think is notable, and obviously in this scenario, Norwin was able to win the game, but finishing in these section games is so crucial for these teams that are kind of learning how to win, since they did almost have a roster reset. What's going to be key for either one of these teams, in particular now Norwin with that little bit of an inside track, to finish some of these crucial games to maybe get into the playoffs and leapfrog a team like Cannon McMillan?
I think it's just taking games on the road. I mean, I think that's where it's going to have to be done, right? I mean, that's a big road win for them at Hempfield. And when you are taking those road wins, and typically when you have a team that makes a deep playoff run, they're usually pretty good on the road. So I think that just taking games on the road from their other section opponents, that's going to be critical. I think that obviously health is going to be a big impact, but one player for Norwin that I was very impressed with, and I also think could be maybe an X factor for them offensively, Mario Sukas, sophomore for them, really nice three-point shot. He's got great shot rotation on his shot. I was really just kind of, again, impressed, but also just pleased with how confident he seemed at the varsity level. Just did not show any kind of fear or any kind of hesitation at all. Within the first 30 seconds of the game, he's taken a three, contested, mind you, and he's making it. I mean, it was really impressive for him. So somebody like that being kind of that X factor, being an 8 to 12 point per game player throughout the rest of the season, I think could also be a little lift that this Norwin team very much needs.
Well, we continue with our starting five, talking about the Burrell Buccaneers boys basketball program. They've had a great season, but they came up shy in a rare Saturday section game against Shadyside Academy. not only did they lose the game, which was notable, but it got a little chippy afterwards. There was some a near altercation, I guess, after Eli Teslovich had a dunk at the end of the game. The outcome had already been decided. So kind of a tough way for the Buccaneers to drop that one. They're still going to be in okay shape. They are tied with Shadyside Academy now, 4-2. Both those teams trailing Deer Lakes, which went to the state championship last year. It does feel like a pretty significant loss for the Buccaneers and for Coach Fantuzzo, though, for where they want to get, because this did seem like their year to take that major step. Now they've got some work to do still to get there.
And also the fact that Burrell fought their way back into this game. I think that's what also was so heartbreaking about this. I mean, it was back and forth, and then gets really close, in the beginning of the fourth quarter. And then that's when you start to see Shadyside Academy pull away a little bit. And I think that's where Burrell, we mentioned earlier how you win these tough section games and how you win down the wire. That's a perfect example for Burrell. They have to find a way that, it might be a 5-4, 6-point game, trading baskets back and forth. How do you find a way to get 2 or 3 stops in a row, get 2 or 3 baskets, take the momentum, especially down the stretch of a game? I mean, that's where you see the good to great teams start to separate. And Burrell, unfortunately, just not able to get it done against Shadyside Academy. But again, I think that there's still plenty of basketball to be played. I mean, yeah, we only have maybe 3-4 weeks left, but you're thinking 6 to 8 games. Anything can happen in that type of span. And if you, take 4 of 6, 5 of 6, totally different story. So I don't think that, Burrell should be packing their bags and heading back home, but obviously a lot to learn from in a loss against a team like Shadyside Academy that clearly has been able to separate themselves from other teams like Burrell.
And I think, at least for you and I, not for the players or the coaches, we can kind of look ahead of what this could mean in terms of the playoffs and the seedings. And here's how I look at it. The Buccaneers had already defeated Shadyside Academy at Burrell, 46-41 back in December. But now it's Shadyside Academy that prevails by 15. And again, sometimes the final score isn't always indicative, but the Bulldogs took care of business. So they split the season series. They have identical section marks. So for Burrell, you really want to make sure that you're nearly perfect from here on out, knowing that you have Deer Lakes again. Because I think right now, the way that things are trending, the committee might favor the Bulldogs if they end with identical section records, because Shadyside Academy would have the more recent and the more lopsided of the two outcomes in their favor. And the difference between, maybe getting, let's say, a number 6 seed versus a number 9 seed could be massive. So that makes every other game so crucial, because these teams are not going to play again in the regular season.
Absolutely. And, you look ahead for Burrell, and they have somewhat of a favorable schedule a little bit. I mean, they have 3 of their next 6-7 games at home. Then you've got a game coming up against Valley. So, that could be maybe an opportunity for them to take that one potentially, because I know that's a Valley team that is struggling. Then you eventually run into a Derry team that, recently seeing Derry, I know they beat up on Valley, but that's a Derry team that can get going at a moment's notice. It's a team that it's very, very offensively speaking. They're a team that can, within 3-4 minute span, they can go off for 20 some odd points. I mean, just watching them explode offensively against Valley recently. So I think Burrell they're really working their way through some of the tougher part of the section schedule. But then, like you said, they have a rematch with Deer Lakes at home, which was obviously going to play into their hand. And then they wrap up the season against Apollo Ridge, which should be a win for them on paper. So again, they have a favorable schedule, but having a favorable schedule can only do so much. You have to obviously take the games and win them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they do have Deer Lakes upcoming, but that will be at Burrell. So they still have a chance to have a statement victory in terms of section play. Well, it was a statement made by Penn Trafford and by their standout senior, Olivia Peppel, as she got to 1,000 career points. It came in a crucial moment in a victory against Greater Latrobe earlier this week. 7th player in team history to get 1,000 points for PT girls. Congrats to her, first off. That's a major accomplishment. Not necessarily surprising, since we saw how good she was as a 9th grader, all the way through. But really, it's a big win as well, because I think those two teams jockeying probably for 3rd and 4th place behind Oakland Catholic and McKeesport. Much needed for PT to kind of get that bounce back victory, and certainly a major accomplishment for Peppel in the process of a win, which always makes it so much more sweet.
Absolutely. I think that's probably what she'll remember the most about the game, is that they won, not her scoring 1,000 points. But you're right about the win over Greater Latrobe, because those are two teams, and especially for Penn Trafford when they got hit with Torrey DiStefano going out. I mean, I think that this is a huge morale win for them, knowing that, hey, even with one of our key players against a very good team in our section, I mean, we can take this game without having that kind of extra help offensively and defensively, mind you. So being able to kind of show this team, the Penn Trafford Warriors, that they can do that without a player like that, I think is going to give them confidence going into, the latter part of the section play and eventually towards the playoffs part, because now they know, hey, if we can do this in the regular season, let's see what we can do in the playoffs as well. So I know that this is a Penn Trafford team that's kind of knocked at the door over the last few years, trying to break through. So I think this could be a win that maybe, kickstarts a little run for them.
And I mentioned that those two teams might be playing for third or fourth. I don't want to discount Thomas Jefferson, which is in the mix as well. So really looking a little bit further ahead, there's a real chance that one of these teams will be out of the playoffs with only 4 guaranteed in. We know Oakland Catholic, McKeesport, you can write them in. So that it's Penn Trafford, TJ, and Greater Latrobe all fighting for maybe what could only be 2 spots. And right now, Greater Latrobe would be the team on the outside looking in. So matchups like this, even though there's another 2-3 weeks still to go in the season, those type of outcomes could determine who ultimately gets into the postseason. So that's a big one for John Janikis and squad. And to your point, much needed to overcome Torrey DiStefano's injury. She's out for the year. They're going to have to figure out a way to grind out victories. They're able to do that against the Wildcats. Well, talking about grinding it out, double overtime was required in a marquee non-section showdown for Franklin Regional and Shaler, 2 teams that have been among the very best in all of 5A. It was rare that it was pretty much the only game in terms of Westmoreland County. It was the only boys game played on Friday night because so many schools had already canceled prematurely, thinking that the snowstorm was going to be a lot worse than it really turned out to be. This one was still on. We got to broadcast it. I know a lot of people were tuning in. It lived up to the billing. Double overtime. Ultimately, the Panthers won it. Both Franklin Regional and Shaler had a last shot opportunity. The Panthers in regulation. The Titans in the first overtime. Ultimately went to the second. FR pulled away. Terrific game. And it won't count in terms of getting into the playoffs, but I think it will mean a lot in terms of the committee evaluating not just the Panthers, but that section as a whole.
And I think on top of that, you want to talk about getting a little bit of a morale boost. I mean, after the loss that they had against Gateway, I think that this Franklin Regional team was looking for, I don't want to say a confidence boost because it's a very confident group, but just a win where they feel, like you said, the committee's going to look at them and say, wow, that was a really good quality win, because it was a great quality win. I mean, Shaler, the number 3 ranked team coming into the game, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but they only had 1 loss coming into the game as well. Yep. So this was a really, really good Shaler team that should not be discounted whatsoever. And Franklin Regional is able to get it done. And how I think it gets done, Sean, Finn Hutchison having 14 points. That 14 points does a world of a difference when you've got Rao that has 28, Rankin's got 17. But we've talked about those two all year long. You
can always count on those two to score. It's about, can someone else?
Without a question. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. That's been maybe the biggest, I don't want to say missing piece, but maybe the biggest question mark around Franklin Regional. Who or how can they get that third option consistently? And Finn Hutchison, I was reading an article, he mentioned after the game, he's been struggling. He's been in a little bit of a slump. And players like Finn Hutchison, who are very good offensively, very good shooters, all they need is one game. They need just one game to get out of a slump, and then all of a sudden, they have amnesia because he is a very, very good scorer. And just watching him play, you can tell he's not worrying about the last shot that he missed or the last 2 shots that maybe he missed. He's thinking about the next one that's going to go down for him. So I think that Franklin Regional, they took a lot away from this win, knowing that you can grind out a win like this. I think Coach Reed said after the game, it was the most complete game that they've played all year. And I mean, it sounds like it, double overtime. You have to basically play 6 quarters of basketball just about. But I think just how they were able to gut this one out against a really good Shaler team. I mean, going into the playoffs, this Franklin Regional team should have all sorts of confidence. And if they ever run into a little bit of a hiccup or a wall before the end of the regular season, they need to bookmark this win because this is one that they'll remember very well.
Absolutely. Big time win for FR. And speaking of wins, the Burrell Buccaneers girls team has been racking up the wins, a 4-game winning streak really it came at the right time because after they lost 3 consecutive games against some heavyweights like St. Joseph, Shadyside Academy, and Aquinas Academy, bounced back with 4 in the win column. They're now sitting at 11-3. This is a team that I think has surpassed expectations. And after they got up to that great start, they wanted to prove it was no fluke. The last couple of weeks, they've done just that. Sean Reddick has really got this team playing some good ball, despite the fact that they've been at times without one of their better players. Their second leading scorer has missed some games that he found a way to overcome.
Well, I'll keep it short and sweet about this one because really the way that they've been winning has been pretty easy to kind of tell. Defensively, they allow the fewest points in all of 3A, 29.5 points per game. And this is not a typo. They held Southmoreland to 14 points. They beat Valley 66-4. They beat York 37-17. They beat Valley again 59-9. And they recently beat Leechburg 53-10. So, I mean, I don't think that there needs to be much more of a breakdown than that. When you're holding teams to not even 20 points, you're doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a team buy-in because when you're missing one of your better offensive players, you need everyone to step up. And you always think, well, who's going to step on offense? It can also be, can we get better on defense to try to win more low-scoring games? And, they've been able to score 45, 50 points during most of these wins. But again, they're holding their opponents to nearly single digits in some of those games. So very impressive work for the Buccaneers girls. Much like the Earl boys, they are in a good spot right now in terms of the postseason outlook. That'll do it for our starting 5, the biggest takeaways from this past week. We'll quickly transition, because it's a fast-paced show, just like the sport of basketball, to our plays of the week. We got 4 of them, and we'll begin with the Franklin Regional boys. Jackie talked about it, the overtime thriller against Shaler area. It had plenty of highlights, none bigger, however, than the spectacular dunk to seal the win for the home team in the second OT, as Cam Rao had a steal and slam that brought the gym into a frenzy. Myself and Roger Downs captioning the play. A 10-point lead for FR. And it feels like that could be insurmountable.
Watch this.
Buckle up for Rao. And a foul against Franklin Regional, but I don't think anyone in this gym could even hear the whistle. The lead is a dozen. Unbelievable play there by Rao. We know that he is a high wire act. I've seen it a few times this year. So as soon as he got that steal, everyone knew something good was going to come. Congrats to him for that spectacular finish, and congrats to Franklin Regional. We continue with the Norwin boys, and the Knights took the first of their rivalry matchups against Hempfield area this season. One of the notable sequences came in the second quarter, courtesy of Dylan McCullough, who got fancy with an impressive layup to pull his team even, with Jack and the unparalleled Mark Katarski setting the scene.
Gets cut off, pivots, good hands by Woodley. McCullough retains possession. Slips through, pretty move.
Really like it. Yeah, the footwork there, the jump stop, nice little finish.
I really like this move by Dylan McCullough. Just compact, short, sweet, to the point, and he finishes in traffic as well.
Absolutely over Max Williams, who is certainly a shot blocker extraordinaire. We continue plays of the week with Derry area, and the Trojans ultimately had a comfortable win against Valley, but the outcome still wasn't decided until Brady Angus decided to play hero at the end of the third quarter. He pulled the Trojans away with a 3 at the buzzer, with Jack and Mark once again providing the commentary.
Clay, that's his 4th, team second of the third. 3 seconds to play. Wozniak finds Angus at the buzzer. Yes! Count it! Brady Angus with the theatrics on the buzzer beater. Big-time shot by a big-time player to give his team a 17-point lead. Going to the 4th right here on WSN.
And this was a big-time 3 by Angus. It was a little bit of a comeback by Valley. This 3 made it a 17-point game going into the 4th, and he gets bumped going down, too. Impressive shot.
Absolutely. We wrap up plays of the week with a college play of the week. It comes courtesy of the Seton Hill University women, as they scored a thrilling win against Mercyhurst on Saturday. And it was the star Christiane Fry who reached a milestone in the process. Her fourth quarter layup gave her 1,000 points for her career. It also proved crucial in the narrow win for Seton Hill at home, as called by myself and Roger.
And that's well shot. Yeah, they have 34, which is Coons being assessed a foul. And there's 1,000 points for Christian Fry. And it gives her team the lead.
There you see the celebration for Christian Fry. Congrats to Christian, one of our favorite players to cover over her time at Seton Hill. She is listed at 5'5", might not even be that tall. She is one of the best scorers in the PSAC, also one of the best rebounders on her team, which speaks to her heart, her tenacity, overcoming, obviously, a lot of taller players to grab those rebounds and to get 1,000+ points, 1,000 now and counting, in her incredible career. That'll do it for Plays of the Week. We now move to our Team of the Week. And really, Jack, this could have been the number one story on our starting five for the takeaways. It's the Greater Latrobe boys, and they opened everyone's eyes with a stunner in Monroeville. They knock off Gateway. Many thought the best team in all of 5A. Some thought one of the best teams in the entire state in 5A. 63-60 Wildcats over the Gators. What it really does is shake up this entire section. It's now a lot of teams race. It's not just Gateway going to run away with it. And Brad Wetzel and crew, you saw how close they came to knocking off Franklin Regional. They found a way to get over the hump against the Gators. Much deserved. Not only that, they also kind of scored a lopsided non-section win against Laurel Highlands this week as well.
Well, I think that's what's so impressive is that despite losing to Franklin Regional, that was such an up-tempo, fast-paced game, and they were able to still put that one behind them. Mind you, they also then lose to Penn Trafford, so they're not fully able to pull it behind them, and then they come back and beat Gateway. So being able to respond, facing that type of adversity, I mean, just an incredible job by Greater Latrobe. But again, it does not get any easier. I mean, they have a little bit of a gauntlet of a schedule coming up. You've got home game against Franklin Regional once we get into February. You go back on the road against Penn Trafford, and then you're home to finish the year against Gateway. So, I mean, those are three big-time games coming down coming down the wire here in the few weeks. And then you look at their upcoming game against Kiski area. That's another team that, you know, we've mentioned on the show many times. They came out hot, kind of hit a little bit of a lull. So it's kind of which direction's Kiski area going to go? Can Greater Latrobe continue to build on this? I think Section 3 is going to play out to be a fascinating section in Class 5A. I'm excited to see how it is because you're right, Sean. I don't think that Gateway is going to run away with it.
In Greater Latrobe, overall, they're 8-7 right now. But of those 7 losses, only 3 came against WPIAL opponents. So they've been playing a couple really good teams from West Virginia. They played 3 games up in New York. And so really, you don't gain a whole lot from looking at the record. What you can really kind of determine is that they're playing top-notch competition all across the tri-state area because, well, I guess New York's not tri-state. Anyway, all across the region, if you will, because they want to test themselves. And they had a really good summer. I talked to Brad Wetzel for a story I did for the Latrobe newspaper. They went down to North Carolina. They won a tournament there. And so they've sort of experienced playing top-notch competition and figuring out how to win prior to the WPIAL part of their schedule. Well, now it's starting to pay off against their district foes. And so even though this was a win that opened some eyes, I think that what they've done over the past handful of months has been very impressive. And I can tell you, one guy who knows where his team is and knows we need to play really good non-section competition is Brad Wetzel. He's been doing it for a long, long time. He's had a lot of success. And I think he realized we have the pieces in place right now to really test these guys. They were also dealt some adversity, though, Jack. Before the season even began, they were without some of their best players, including his son, John Wetzel, who's now back. He's given them a big boost. Alex Tash, the big-time football prospect, out for the season. Jack Durinovich also out. So they had to kind of move some guys around, but it seems like they've sort of figured out the right formula at this point.
And they're catching fire at the perfect time of the season, right? I mean, you look at their trend, and it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And, you know, pretty much since the turn of the year, they've been near perfect outside the 2 losses to Franklin Regional and Penn Trafford. And I think on top of just those out-of-town trips, going on the road, all of that, it teaches you what it's like to not play with your home crowd behind you. Because anybody can agree that's played a sport, having your home crowd behind you, it's a wonderful feeling. When you go on the road and you have everybody cheering against you, not that great of a feeling. So now they've become so accustomed to being on the road, kind of being the underdog or the bad guys, if you will. And they know what that's like. So I think that a team like that is so well tested on the road, they are in a really tough section. When we get to the playoffs, or at least we get closer to it, and this team is vying for positioning, I mean, I think that Latrobe is going to find themselves ahead of their fellow section mates or other teams in 5A just because of their ability to play on the road. They know what that's like, and they understand the mindset you have to have going into a road game when, let's face it, it's kind of you against the world in that situation.
Absolutely. And I mentioned some of the guys that they've been without this season, but how about the guys who've been there for them? Max Butler, who's been outstanding as a junior, Jaton Williams and Darius Davis, they're two seniors. And then Kyle McNeil really stepping up in a big way recently. Ian DeSerb, another one. So they've really assembled a quality group, a lot of youth on it, but certainly they have come to age in recent weeks. Congrats to Greater Latrobe boys, our team of the week. Let's now look at our trivia question. Before we get to this week's, we'll revisit last week's. And I talked about Rick Klimchak, the head coach of Greensburg-Salem girls. Congrats to him. He has since gotten victory number 400 since we last met. And I mentioned that prior to Greensburg-Salem, he had coached at a few different spots. Where were those spots that he coached before the Golden Lions? The answer, with the Jeanette boys, where he had a heck of a lot of success, briefly with the Salzburg boys, and with the Franklin Regional girls. So again, Jeanette boys, Salzburg boys, Franklin Regional girls, the correct answer to last week's trivia question, which takes us to this week's. And if you pay close attention, you might already have an idea for this one. But as of today, which is Sunday, which Westmoreland County girls team has the best scoring defense amongst the entire county? So as of today, Sunday, January 21st, which Westmoreland County girls team has the best scoring defense in the county? If you want to answer, you can tweet at us, or what's it called now that it's X?
I think it's X. I think it's, I don't know. I just keep saying tweet.
They're going to X. Oh, I'm knocking my microphone off. I'm excited. They're going to X at us.
They might throw the X at us.
Okay. Whatever. Reach out to us.
Just let us know.
X. Yes. You could also comment on this YouTube channel. You could reach us on Instagram. Whatever, Facebook. There's
you can text me if you have my phone number. I'm fine with that.
Send an email. Sure. Yes. Either way, if you want to chime in, feel free to do so all throughout this week. Lastly, let's take a look ahead. And we've got a lot of broadcasts this week on WSN, a lot of other games that are marquee as well. We'll start with the boys. Monday, Borough at Valley, always a good rivalry matchup. York at Greensburg-Salem, couple of Westmoreland showdowns. Tuesday, a big one. I'll have the call of Sarah Catholic at Greensburg Central Catholic. Ligonier Valley at Burrell, Berry area at Deer Lakes, and Southmoreland at Valley. Friday, Penn Trafford at Franklin Regional, Bell Vernon area at Southmoreland. That will be a big showdown. Norwin at Cannon McMillan. That could have major playoff implications. Greater Latrobe Kiski area, Burrell at Derry area. Saturday, Derry and Mount Pleasant will square off on the boys' side. Girls action, Jack. You'll be on the call of Plum at Franklin Regional on Monday on WSN in Murraysville. That is the Bernie Puchka game, as he coaches against his former team, and he coaches against the district where he currently teaches. Valley at Derry area, Burrell at Jeanette, York at Ligonier Valley also on Monday. Tuesday, Hempfield area at Greater Latrobe. Thursday, a big one in 6A, Norwin hosting North Allegheny. That will be on WSN. Greensburg-Salem at Valley, Burrell at Mount Pleasant. We'll also have some college hoops coverage Wednesday. IUP comes to Greensburg to play Seton Hill in the women's-men's doubleheader on WSN. Jack, quickly, your thoughts on the week ahead?
Well, my friend, I don't think there really needs to be much else said other than NA Norwin Thursday. I mean, I think that is the marquee matchup of the week. Some great games on Friday that I think have a lot of playoff implications. Obviously, PT Franklin Regional, Greater Latrobe Kiski area, but NA Norwin, I mean, it's always exciting. It's always down to the wire. It's always a game where people look back and say, did you hear what happened in the most recent NA Norwin girls game? So that is going to be the game that everyone should be highlighting on the schedule, because that is a game that it's going to have implications of who's going to be first, who's going to be second. Not to mention, it's because they'll probably run into each other at some point during the playoffs, could give a little bit of a boost to whomever it is that's going to be kind of, carrying that into the playoffs with them. So I think that NA Norwin game is going to be the one to pay close attention to.
Two things to keep in mind for that game. One, the first matchup this season out in Wexford did go in favor of the Knights. They won on the road, so they've typically done very well at home against North Allegheny. They had struggled to win at NA, so they can sweep the season series if they do that. Obviously, they're going to finish in first place, and I think they should be the number one seed if they do that. If not, if they split, the most recent meeting goes to NA, probably the Tigers will have the inside track in terms of the better seeding, maybe even as high as number one overall. And you talk about meeting again in the postseason. Well, they happened to meet 4 times last year, including the WPIAL playoffs and the state playoffs as well. And guess what? They split those 2 matchups as well. So they went 2-2 a year ago against one another. Wouldn't be surprised if something similar happens this year. That's going to do it for this edition of the Westmoreland Hardwood podcast right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network's YouTube channel. Of course, each and every week, not only watch this episode, watch prior episodes, but check out the website for articles, for live and archive game broadcasts as well. But for now, we'll put a bow on this one for Jack. Sean signing off. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next week right here on the Westmoreland Hardwood Podcast.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.